Good afternoon, sorors, guests, and friends. Thank you for joining the marvelous new chapter of Iota Phi Lambda Sorority Incorporated as we continue our celebration of American Education Week, a time when we honor educators who don't just teach, but transform. At Iota Phi Lambda Sorority Incorporated, founded by Lola Mercedes Parker and six extraordinary women, we hold the ideals of friendship and love, nurturing professional women of the present and the future. And we believe in pouring into others. Our guest today does all of that and more. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor to introduce today's special guest, Dr. Jacqueline Allen Trimble. Dr. Trimble, welcome, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. And you forgot to say, I taught you.
Never can forget to say that. Absolutely, absolutely.
All my students, my wonderful students who are out there making their own difference in the world. And I think it's so marvelous. And I'm so proud of you, Destiny.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Trimble. You know, we love, adore you so much, and we just appreciate all that you do. And to be able to sit and speak with you today about American Education Week, I'm excited about this conversation. But before I get into my questions, because I'm getting ahead of myself, would you please share with us one of your poems from your first collection, American Happiness, If I Didn't Write Poetry?
All right. I'm going to read this poem. It's fun for me to read it today because I never read this poem. It's a funny little poem. But I was thinking about what would happen if I didn't write poetry. What could I do? If I didn't write poetry, maybe robbing banks is my true calling. And instead of making poems, I should learn to dodge surveillance cameras, put on a disguise, tortoiseshell shades. I could take a dog with me and a cane. Nobody would suspect a blind woman. I might hire an accomplice named Fred to drive the getaway car, an inconspicuous Prius. Even crooks can learn love the environment. I tap my way across the lobby with my fake seeing eye dog, Lester. I smile at the teller, reach into my raincoat. Oh yeah, it would have to be raining for atmosphere. Then give her my note. Perhaps something in iambic pentameter. Better yet, heroic couplets. Please give me all the money in your till so no one in this bank I'll have to kill. You can see why the bank robbing might work out better than the poetry. Wait, I forgot the gun. I hate guns, but a bank robber must do what a poet only imagines. I point a plastic, yet convincing, 38 at her, hand her the couplets, take the money, and Lester and I hightail it out to Fred, waiting in a pink Cadillac. So damn foolish. Well, doing 2 to 10 will give me time to rework my sonnets and villanelles.
I just love that piece. Thank you so much for sharing it. You know, what I love about this particular poem is, you know, as a writer myself,
Yes.
I'm an emerging scholar. I consider myself always emerging, a career woman and entrepreneur. I find myself often playing with the idea of what ifs, right, in
Yes.
life. And so this piece really, really resonates with me because I believe that what ifs spark imagination. They bring relief,
Yes.
right? They force you to a place of clarity.
Yes.
And they remind us that even when we deviate, right, to entertain distractions or, I mean, let's be honest, just to survive, to make a
Yes.
paycheck,
Yes.
right? Purpose has a very interesting way of finding us exactly where we're meant to be. And so I'd love to hear from my first question. I'd love to hear from you about when you first realized that writing had chose you. Um, and when you think about your own purpose, like what have your what ifs taught you about the inevitability of your calling as a writer?
So I think I rolled out of the womb a writer. And the only thing that was required is that I had to learn to read. And
Mhm.
I remember so distinctly the day that I learned to read. I didn't go to kindergarten because In my day, you didn't have to go to kindergarten, so a lot of kids didn't go. So went to first grade, couldn't read. And I remember sitting in Miss Edna T. Mosley's first grade class, and we would read these books called the Dick and Jane Readers or the McGuffey Readers. Um, and it was, there was a sentence, Fluffy jumped off the TV swiftly. And I thought, wow, that word swiftly, it's like the perfect meaning of sound and sense. And I learned to read that year, learned to read the sort of first part of that year. And it was like it opened up this world to me that was just extraordinary. And I just fell in love with words. And I immediately, as soon as I could read, as soon as I could string some written words together, I began to write. You know, I just began to write. It was just an impulse in me that continued. And the reason I became a college professor is because I thought, erroneously so, that it would give me time to write. I could just be an English professor and then I could just, teach and write. That's not really how it goes, but that was my thoughts. And I've always loved, my mother had this set of Harvard classics. I don't even know if they make them anymore, but we still have them. And it was just like all of Western literature condensed in a set of like encyclopedias. And so you had everything from, Plato to American Walt Whitman sort of thing. And I remember reading as a little kid, elementary school kid, people like Poe and Eliot. Eliot was one of my favorites. Did I have any idea what they were talking about? Not a clue. I had no idea what any of this meant, but I loved the sounds they made. I mean, when Poe said the silken, certain, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain, you can literally hear the curtains rustling. When Eliot says, let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient ether rised upon the table. It was the sounds these people were making. And I'm like, I want to do that. I want to make those sounds.
I love that. I want to make those sounds. And it's what you're capturing for me is something I experienced too, just the heartbeat. Like it's like a living, breathing thing. The words on the paper come alive. Yeah. And it has its own cadence, its own rhythm, its own life, and it just takes you straight to another place, right? Mm-hmm. And that experience is one that I aspire for every last one of our young people to experience, right? Because if they can get there, they might want to go back, right? Yes. They feel like they might want to go back. And even with the way you've explained that so beautifully about how this has just been something that's been ingrained in you and just really innate in you, even before you knew what the words really were. It's interesting that, you talked about still balancing that, professional trajectory with the passion of writing. And unfortunately, even with the long history of accomplished writers such as yourself, writing is still not always considered a real or stable profession. Right. But we know like the impact literature has on shaping culture, economy, and history, right, of the world. And so I remember, I in doing my research in one of the interviews, you talked about your first book contract and that aha moment when you gave yourself permission to believe maybe I can be a writer, right? And so I want to dig a little into that and like connect that to another moment you talked about in that same interview where you talked about Alice Walker giving your husband, Mr. Trimble, some advice on supporting you to be a writer, and her response was simply like, do the dishes, right? I just thought that was so brilliant. And it was brilliant advice about how people in your support system can help make space for your gifts and your passions and purposes. And so and another connection here, like this past Sunday, we had our American Education Week service at St. Peter AME Church. Okay. And the message was reset with boundaries. And I immediately, thought about, like this is making me think about that moment in, Dr. Trimble's interview and about like, how support and boundaries are so deeply connected, especially for women
Yeah.
pursuing courageous paths.
Yeah.
So, with all of that connectivity, my question is, what does true support look like for you
Mhm.
now? And how do boundaries help women excel beyond imposed limits?
So, and I haven't done a study of this, but I you can notice that a lot of women writers tend to be older writers. And it's like after I have raised children and had a career, then I have this time and luxury to write. So you look at people who are some women writers in their 80s still writing. It's almost like um, we sort of find that balance on the back end after some of our other creative energies. Because I spent a lot of the creativity of my young years making cupcakes and elf costumes. Which is but that's a great thing. I do not regret one moment of that,
Yes.
because my children are wonderful human beings. And I think we need to contribute wonderful human beings to the world. But finding balance is very difficult. Um, Working, because I went to school, I wrote, it was like everything was all at once. So, but I was really lucky. I had no idea what I was doing when I got married. I was 24 years old. And you get married because you're in love and you're 24 years old, you don't know what in the world you're doing. And I just was blessed by God to have married the right man, a man who has supported me, worked two jobs while I went to commuted to Tuscaloosa to get my PhD every day, who took care of tiny little children, who is the one who told me um, one morning that I was not happy. This is what he said to me. He said, "You're not happy. You're not writing." I'm like, "What are you talking about, man? I got to get this child to school and I got to do this." He said, "No, no, you're not happy because you're not writing. You need to write." And and I just hate that about him because he knows me better than I know myself. And he sometimes badgers me, says, "Are you writing? What are you doing? What are you doing? You need to be." And you need a person like that in your life who is not going to impede you, but who is going to push you toward, he says, you have to walk in what God has given you.
Mm.
You have to walk. And sometimes, I'm coming to a point. I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm
That's all
coming
right. That's all right.
um sometimes we can't see our purpose.
Mm.
And so you need to surround yourself with people who love and support you and can tell you the truth, not to bring you down, but to uplift you and to help you walk into your purpose.
Mm.
And I was lucky enough to have married somebody who was like that. He said, when I went back to school, he said, all I ask of you, this man, when I tell you this man worked two jobs, I mean, 2 40-hour-a-week jobs.
Wow.
He said, the only thing I ask you is don't come back down that road without that degree. And I didn't. That kept me going. And when he said, you need to be writing, at that time, I had tenure. I had been a tenured full professor at Huntington, where I've
Mm.
been chair for a number of years. I was a tenured full professor at Alabama State and current chair. And I thought, what is this man talking about? Though that opportunity is over, I am never going to be the poet I set out to be. And he says, yes, you are.
Mm.
And because you're not going to be happy if you don't. And I started writing again because basically my husband said, this what you gonna do. And I have never been happier. You know,
Wow.
I've never been happy. So you got to walk in your purpose. And sometimes I get down and I say, oh, I spent all those years not writing. And what was I doing with my life? He said, you were teaching thousands of students.
Mm.
They needed you. They needed you to be there and to stand
Yeah.
in the gap and to teach them. He says, can't you see that?
That's
Can't
right.
you see that you are doing what God intended you to do?
You know, that is such a beautiful perspective to insert into the idea of resetting with boundaries, because a lot of times nowadays we talk about boundaries, we're talking about like the things that we need to do internally, the work we need to do, and how we need to communicate where we are to other people. But
Yeah.
also it's about the boundaries of your relationships, and do they fortify,
Yes.
right, your purpose? Do they fortify the path that you're supposed to be walking? That is a very powerful lesson. I think we're going to get into that just in a little bit later. Um, you know, and I also love the way that story talks about. Well, I want to ask you to read this particular poem, but the poem you have, it's did John Paul Sartre ever
Yes.
ask Debussy to go to the Winn Dixie, which
Yes.
I can go on forever about that one, because it feels like, foreshadowing, right? As literally
Yes.
when Dixies are closing, right, all across the
Yes.
South right now, but
Yes.
also symbolic at the same time of like the end of an era
Yes.
where women are no longer really accepting that they are expected to just do everything for everyone else and leave themselves out of the picture,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
And so I mean, you talked to us about navigating that tug, between like I'm happy, I'm my wife, I'm a mother, I'm an educator, I'm happy, but also being pushed, to really get back into alignment with this purpose that your husband saw in you. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, now that you've been in this space for some time now, what does balance look like for you today?
So, my children are grown now, which is a great thing. So a lot of that energy has been redirected. And the other thing is, I still struggle with balance
Mm.
because, and I am trying to work on even now the word no,
Oh,
the word no,
such a big word.
because so much has been given to me. Part of it is so much has been given to me. And I live in such gratitude in so many people. We all have stories about people who have mistreated us and da 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 da. But I don't want to dwell on those people. They're irrelevant. But there's so many other people who have supported me and who have done for me and who have uplifted me and who have just helped me in so many ways that I hate to say no when somebody calls me and I think, well, that person was so good to me and so da 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 da. And so I'm trying to learn to say no. Part of my sabbatical has been saying too many yeses to people when I need to be writing, but that's okay. And so I'm trying to learn to say no. And I've been practicing that a little more. And what I've learned is that people don't get upset if you say no. If you say, I'm just sorry, I can't do it. No, I can't, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And they're like, okay, maybe next year or maybe next time. And it's okay. So that struggle is internal. It's not with anybody else. It's not with anything else. It's learning to say no. And I was talking to my daughter about this one time several years ago, and she said, what it is, Mama, is that boys are taught to get what they want,
Mm.
and girls are taught to accept what they get.
Ooh. Is she? She's right, right?
You know, she was an English major. She's a
Oh,
lawyer.
there we go.
She's a lawyer now. She went the corporate lawyer right, but this child has been dropping wisdom on me since she was like a toddler.
I love that.
But when she said that, it was like something clicked in my head that women are always accepting whatever they get or whatever it is. We just accept it, and we walk through the world with that energy, and so we end up with things piled like this
Mm-hmm.
because we just take it all on, take it all in, just whatever until we are just worn out. And another friend of mine, and that's another thing, you have to surround yourself too with people who can tell you the truth in love. I have a really good friend. He's a writer friend of mine. We've written together. His name is Alex Berger. He's a brilliant playwright, showrunner, all of these things. And I called him one day and I said, Alex, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm so depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started talking about all these things. He said, Jackie, You're not depressed. You're depleted.
Ooh.
And I thought, that is exactly it, because I didn't, it felt different. I didn't know, I didn't have a word for it. I didn't have a word for it. So I said depression. But what it really is was just depleted. He said, when you are depleted, you cannot do anything for anybody else. You need rest.
Mm.
You need to back up. You need to say, no, shut it out. You are depleted. You need to fill yourself up again.
Wow. There's so much wisdom in what you just said. And I think about not only do a lot of women get stuck right there,
Yeah.
right? Like, I know I need to say no. I know I need to ask for the things I need from my support system. Um, I also know I need to be mommy, wife, daughter, sister, business owner, professor. I have to do, I also got to do like, so, they get kind of stuck. And in the same vein, writers get stuck like that too, right?
Absolutely.
All the things they have to do, but how do I carve out time to write and
Right.
ask for that and not feel guilty about it?
Right.
And so I really want to pivot a little bit more into that, because in American Happiness, I've experienced you taking readers through grief, frustration, fear, disappointment, these universal emotions,
Yeah.
that um, you know, they're universal emotions, but the way that you render them is just with such clarity that it becomes like this communal experience, right? These things that can feel isolating,
Yeah.
you
I
become
hope
you
so.
welcome us into community to experience together. And so I think about, even as you talked about navigating this path and having support, talk to us about like how writing through heaviness has helped you like understand your own resilience.
Yeah.
And what do you hope your readers learn about navigating their own difficult seasons through your work?
So if you ask me what I think, I can tell you. If you ask me what I feel, I struggle. And so what I have to do is I have to write it down. I have to work it out on paper. And I have to take all those sort of difficult emotions and figure it out. And so, the greatest prize I have gotten as a writer is when people have written me. Sometimes one guy wrote me from Australia and said, I get it now. You
Wow.
know, I get it now. He said, I don't really like political poetry. And when he was reading my poem, This Is Why People Burning Down Fast Food Joints and Whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I was prepared to hate that poem. And he said, and I said, I get it now. I see. I see. And so I think that it's me. Most of the poems are me working it out, working through my own emotions, my own trying to understand history and its connections, trying to understand grief, trying to understand these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope what I do is invite the reader to come try to understand with me so that we can both work it out. And I think that is the way I best understand the world, through writing about it, because it is the way I understood the world, through reading about it. And so as a writer, that's what I have to do. I'm working on a new collection called Joy in a Time of Elegy. And it's about the death of our son, of course. But elegy is both a lament for what has been lost and a celebration for what remains and for what was. And so I'm thinking about that we are living in an elegiac time where we have lost so much. We are losing so much, personally, um, in terms of the country, in terms of global warming and everything else. And so I'm writing all of these poems about loss because elegy or grief is one of the oldest documented emotions, because we all experience grief. We all experience grief. And
Yes.
so I'm working out my own grief, my own grieving about all of these things. And I hope that it will help somebody work through their grieving about many of these things.
Again, this recurring theme of, our it's very interesting to me because, individualism is such a complex concept, right? And how it creates isolation, and it creates, but there is this deep introspection that happens on an individual level. And I believe through writing we're able to bring that introspection into community, right?
Mhm.
And that is just so powerful, and necessary right now. And in the spirit of that, I would love for you to invite you to read, and share with us How to Survive the Apocalypse, because I think it captures a lot of what you just talked about.
Yes. Oh, wrong book. Um, How to Survive the Apocalypse. Eat grapes daily. Peel them first. Stitch the skins into bulletproof vests. Kiss old men with eyes open. Breathe deeply bay rum and formaldehyde. Visit grocery stores like touring museums. Count the dwindling rows of kitsch. Read comic books and the Apocrypha. Absorb the Torah, Quran, and Kama Sutra. Bathe in public in famous fountains. Drink of lakes, rivers, the waters of Flint. Stop making love or forego virginity. Please yourself incessantly and loudly. Study penal systems, Japanese internment camps. Post about the Holocaust, Jim Crow, and the Trail of Tears. Learn to barbecue, to saute narcissism. Kill politicians and derelicts for protein. Survive the lynchings like your ancestors. Live by rage and joy and turpentine.
That last line gives me chills every single time, like just all up my back. And I mean, because this, and I won't go too deep here. I'm sure we'll be able to have another conversation, because the way that you weave this you weave these very difficult and scary things in with humor and tenderness and grit, but like a pinch of fear, like salt, just enough for taste. It is, it's like this quiet audacity to, like, it's like, okay, through all the work, if we can get through this
Yeah,
poem,
yeah.
we can have the audacity to keep going, even though it feels like everything is shifting around us, right?
There's a the editor of Salvation South, a dear who is becoming a dear friend of mine, said that reading my poetry was like getting poked in the eye with a sharp stick, but in the best way. He says like you need that poke in the eye, and it's like one of my favorite descriptions of my work. Uh,
I can sense that. I don't know if I would find any joy in that personally, but I get it. I get it wholeheartedly. And so I would love, because even when I hear that poem, I definitely tie it to, this is, I mean, the main thing that stands out to me is like endurance,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
and so what I'm thinking about, like, as for educators who are just navigating so many challenges within the
yeah,
system right now, what would be your advice for them to persevere as they are surviving, but to
yeah.
still arrive at joy? Because you talked about coming to joy even in grief and sadness and these other things. Like, what would be your advice to them as they're surviving this time, but to still bring joy for themselves and their students?
So I think we in education sometimes in our zeal to think about what students need to know and what they don't know,
Mm.
we forget we forget that our students are human beings. And when they walk into our classroom, they don't walk into that classroom with deficiency, even though that's kind of how we measure things is what is their deficiency that I gotta, close those deficiencies. But they walk into those classrooms whole human beings with a history, with joy, with pain, with sorrow, with all kind of burdens, some of which you can't imagine,
Mhm.
with their own thoughts. And it's your job not to fill up the deficiencies, but to open them up, to open their minds, to encourage them, to give them opportunities to learn, to love learning, to love learning.
That's it.
And I think that the thing that I love the most about teaching is learning
Mm.
from my students, with my students, you know. Um, and I think that that's where the joy is. And I don't think there's any joy greater in the world than you can look at the faces of your students, and all of a sudden you see people have an aha moment.
Mm.
And it's like, that is something that will be important to that person
Mhm.
for the rest of their lives. If you can just show them, fall in love with learning.
Mm. Dr. Trimble, what I'm hearing here is you found through your profession as an educator
Yeah.
this deep connection between joy and service,
Yeah.
right? Like, this joy of learning is instilling this joy of learning is like a part of your service, right? Like,
Right.
what, like, this is my service work, like, and for those aha moments to come up for, I remember on another interview you mentioned, you said, uh, I'm interested in the in ameliorating the suffering of others. I believe that's what you said.
Yeah.
And, you know, to me, that resonates so deeply with the spirit of Iota Phi Lambda, right? Because
Mm.
we believe in service through, friendship and love, right? That roots our service work. And so you talked a bit about, you already talked about like how, students influence you, and you talked about, how you you utilize your work to kind of help people navigate open them up and navigate their own journeys. But I want to kind of like now pivot into this, like into that network piece you mentioned earlier about your community, and think about, like, I know you've spoken in many different instances about like having, you called it like three mothers,
Yeah.
right? And how like women to women mentorship has really shaped you and been
Wow.
instrumental in your life. Um, which is another, another key pillar of Iota Phi Lambda sorority is, of course, sisterhood, right? We see it as not just a tool for survival, but it's literally how we thrive and how we make an impact on the world around us, in which our founders saw to be a male dominated. And now
Mhm.
we see it as a technology centered business world that
Yes.
impacts that human connection piece, right? And so I would love to hear from you, knowing that those are things you value in terms of like mentorship and peer to, women, women to women mentorship and those kinds of things. Like, tell me, what does healthy intergenerational
Mhm.
peer to peer mentorship look like to you in 2025?
If you can help somebody, help them. If you can make the way easier, make the way easier. If people, I have former students and colleagues and friends who call me up for advice. Give them the best advice you can give them. I have been so blessed, so lucky in my life to have been mentored by extraordinary women
Mm,
who understood the value. The Western tradition often feels like competition, like there can only be one person at the top, right? Well, that's just a way of thinking. That's not the truth.
mhm,
The truth is, there is room for everybody, that we are not in competition with each other. What we are is if we are in community with each other. And
yes.
as we continue to build the community, if each of us is successful, what
Mhm,
does that mean for our community?
Mm.
What does that mean for our children coming on? So you have to, sometimes within our thinking about things, we have to rearrange our thinking. And, you know, every success, every success is just one more success for our whole community.
I love that. I love that. And in particular, you teach at a historically Black college, or historically Black university,
Yeah.
known as HBCUs, and I don't think that statement could not have been truer. That statement could not be truer for the founding principles that HBCUs stand on, right?
Right.
And so we've already talked about, I don't have to, I will say again and again, as many times as I have to, how extraordinary your writing is. And I think we talked a little bit about, like, in different words, to me, it's a bit of it's a diagnosis with like a prescription and a care plan, right? It's all in there, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it's also so deeply rooted in justice. And I think that's why it doesn't matter if you may come from different walks of life or not identify with the lived experiences expressed in the poem. The justice centered nature of it is so universal that everyone can find themselves meeting. It's like a meeting place, right? We can all find ourselves in the center of it, right?
Yes.
And I think about, as the current chair of the Department of Languages and Literature at the Alabama State University,
Alabama State University.
HBCU, I know that in this, HBCUs were born out of advocacy, as a form of advocacy, right? Advocating for the education of African Americans. And there are institutions that also hold that resilience and that reimagining spirit. And so, and I think about the lineage of Alabama State's, literature and commonly known as the English department, right?
Yes, yes.
And I think about, it holds the work of Professor Joanne Gibson Robinson, right? Who is an architect of the Montgomery bus boycott, one of the most important civil rights leaders in this nation.
Absolutely.
Arguably the world, right? And even still, even more in your personal life, like you stand on a legacy of your aunt, Mahala Ashley Dickerson, right? Who when I learned that, I'm like, what? This is so cool, because I actually covered her for Black History Month last year.
Wow.
Yes, and she's the first Black woman attorney, in the state of Alabama. And so learning about, more about your life and your work, and this commitment to justice is like both ingrained and it's innate, but it's also ingrained in you.
Yeah.
And that's experience some of your students share. They have some influences in their lives, but so many have just lived experiences they have not yet to voice. And so, my question is, so how does standing within, that lineage shape the way you teach language and literacy and activism to young people who are just grappling with a reality and an awakening? Because that's what happens in college, right?
Yes.
You have your reality, but then you're also being awakened to these other layers of the world that you never saw before. And so, how does that, knowing the ground in which you stand in Alabama State and the seat in which you lead in your own heritage, how does that shape the way you teach language, literacy, and activism?
So I am always aware that the job we do at HBCUs is the most important, and I've taught at PWIs, and it was great. It was fun. No problems whatsoever. And I had, and I taught the same way, because my thing is everybody that African American history, African American literature is American history and American literature. And one of the reasons we have so many issues in this country and so much ignorance is that we have been taught a history that never existed. And we have not been taught the actual history of this country. And we cannot be afraid of the actual history, because the history is not the future. The history is just the history. But you have to understand it, and you have to know it, and you have to understand what these writers are writing about in order to move forward on the truth and not a lie. And so when I stand in that classroom, I want to arm my students with credible information
That's right.
based on history and the truth. And because they live in a world that has often provided them with misinformation or half information or no information, they have thoughts about themselves. I used to teach this course called Race and we would just fill in the blank: race and justice, race and economics, race and whatever. And whenever we got to race and economics, I would say, what group constitutes the most poor people in the country? Everybody would say, and it's all black students and they're black people. Wrong. And they said, oh no, Dr. Trimble, we know that's right. I was like, no. What? And I said, why do you even think that? They said, well, everybody knows only black people get food stamps and da 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 and this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, look at the WIC posters and look at the this posters. I said, that becomes the face that you see. Why do you think that is? So I want you to go look it up and just see. Come back next time and we'll talk about it. And they would come back and they go, are you kidding me? And I said, so why put a black mother and child every single poster about this? What kind of political cachet does that have? My point is that I don't want you to believe what I believe. What I want you to do is learn to do credible research. Meaning, not on TikTok, although TikTok has some truthful things. Although Instagram has some truthful things, but that is not a primary source. And you need to learn how to find credible primary sources so that you can understand the world for yourself. And so it's really interesting. It's really interesting. But what I notice is by the end of that class, people had to rearrange their thinking. Black people had to rearrange their thinking about who Black people were.
Yes.
And, this idea of criminalization of Black people, all Black people are so thuggish and so this and that and the other. I said, you need to stop giving yourself those messages. You need to stop giving yourself those messages, because those messages are not based in fact.
That's right. I tell young people that I encounter all the time, like, ask yourself this one question. I'm not going to tell you how to think, but who does that narrative serve?
Who does the narrative benefit?
That if you answer that question and you come to a satisfactory point, then that's rooted in truth, then you just go from there. I'm not going to tell you, but in that in itself, talking young people through that question, yes. I've experienced the same thing. They're like, there's no way.
What?
But way.
But way.
But way.
But way.
I love that. And I have a couple more questions before we get close to the close. And then, before you close us out with a final reading.
Okay.
And so I did want to talk about, because, as you think about this deep work that has to be done, and everyone, everyone needs to be successful in their part of the work, right? In order for us to continue to forge a path forward to, reimagining and reshaping the world we actually desire and deserve. And so I think about quite often as Iota Phi Lambda sorority prepares to turn 100 in 2029, this mission of leadership and that's rooted in like scholarship and service and empowering business professionals for the future. It feels even more pressing to me as well that, that even around those things are rooted in a truth. And so, but also, legacy organizations also, also, not just the young people, but, some of the, legacy workers, we need education too. And so I think
Absolutely.
this natural partnership opportunity that
Yeah.
is that is present. And I would love to know, you've worked with legacy orgs in
Yeah.
different capacities. And I would love to know, what would you like to see? What would be your call to action for legacy orgs to strengthen literacy education, and partner with educators like you?
So I would say all we have to do is sit down and do it. I mean, it's like the people are there. The people with the knowledge are there. The institution is there. I am not for reinventing the wheel.
Mm.
And I know that everybody wants to go out and invent their own organization. And we don't always support what we already have in place for various reasons, and some of them sometimes good reasons. But I won't get into that today. But anyway, I would say reach out. Let me tell you something about professors. There is nothing we love to talk about more than our field of study.
Yes.
And we will come to every brunch meeting, breakfast meeting, lunch meeting, and tell you all about X, Y, or Z. All you have to do is reach out. Usually the way is to call the chairperson and say, hey, do you have somebody can you come, or can you send somebody to talk to us about X? I would, I would work in partnership with some of our local institutions to create maybe a syllabus of what you need to know. Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
don't know what you don't know. I always believe that people should start where they are. People don't even know about the history of their own cities. There's
Yes.
Montgomery is a city. It's got a crazy history, and most people don't even know it. And so I would sort of say this is going to be our year of learning, and we want to learn about our city. We want to learn about our history. We want to learn about our institutions. One of the things I want to do as poet laureate is to create a digital archive that
Mm.
chronicles every poet in the state of Alabama. It
Wow.
provides a place where teachers, students, etc., can go. If you're worried about AI, hey, here's a poet in Birmingham that is not all over the internet, and
Mhm.
so AI doesn't have any data to.
That's right.
Well, the student has to do it him, her, themselves, right? So I think there are a lot of things we can do, but I think the first it begins with the conversation. What is it that you want to know, or ask a question? What is it that I need to know?
Mm. I think that's. I mean, so many. Start with starting your community, connect with the people right where you are, and be intentional about learning where you are first, and build from there. And all of us can do that. I mean, I love how accessible that solution is. It's a very accessible solution. And so, well, I did want to know, what your, I'm listening and I'm thinking about those who, right now, more than ever, we need creatives.
Yeah.
We need writers and singers and poets and storytellers, thinkers and the doers and makers, to just people who are just not afraid to use their voice and
Yeah.
shape the culture we're living in today, to step up and drown out a lot of the noise.
Yeah.
And so I would love to hear, as a part of the first part of our closing, what would be your charge to those listening today, students, educators, emerging writers who feel the calling but
Mhm.
haven't stepped into it yet?
Okay. Well, I think the best advice I ever heard for creatives was from Spike Lee. He was at a bookstore event, and giving a little talk. And of course, everybody wants to know how to make a movie. How do I become a filmmaker?
Mm-hmm.
And so a young man stood up to him and said, I really want to be a filmmaker, but I don't really have money. And how do I do it? And he said, hey, what kind of phone you got in your pocket? He said, I have an iPhone. He
Mm-hmm.
said, get your iPhone out and start making movies. Figure
Mm.
out a story you want to tell. Pick that iPhone up and tell your story. And we have more resources than we think. If you want to be a writer, start writing.
Mm.
If you don't know what that means, you know what you do? Pick out your top three books,
Mm-hmm.
that you really love. Read them and think about not so much what they're saying, but how are they saying it? Look for strategy. Or if you don't want to do that, just let them inspire you and start writing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if the writing is not good, who cares? Keep writing until it is. You
Mm-hmm.
learn, writing is one of those arts you learn by doing just two things: reading and writing, reading and writing. And you keep doing that. You don't have to have money to go to fancy workshops.
Mm-hmm.
There are tons of YouTube tutorials.
Yes.
There are tons of interviews with writers telling you all kind of free information that's widely available. If you
Mm-hmm.
really want to do it, the main thing is, if you want to be a painter, pick up a paintbrush. If you want to be a dancer, turn on the music. If you want to be whatever it is you want to be, pick up your instrument, whether that be a pen or a guitar or whatever, and start doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the greatest artists in the world were self-taught. If you
Mm-hmm.
can take a class and you can go to school, go to school.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing to be whatever kind of artist you want to be, here's what the artists don't tell you, is perseverance, repetition, practice
Mm.
over and over and over again.
Wow. Solid, practical, but to the point. I appreciate it. I am going to ask one more question.
Sure.
Um, and I gotta pick between the two. Um, yes, and so, well, we're honoring American Education Week, and we do recognize that education comes in many forms, inside, outside of the classroom. And I would love to know, outside of just those creators, what would be your call to action to those who feel responsible to teach, to guide, or
Mhm.
inspire others, but maybe maybe may not be encouraged right now,
Yeah.
or just may not know how to get into it, or feel like they don't have the credentials to do it. What does that, what will be your call to action, your word of encouragement to those who feel a call to teach in this era?
So teach what you know. Everybody knows something. Everybody knows how to do something. If you feel really compelled to teach, um, you know, maybe you don't write, but you bake cakes. Maybe
Hmm.
you don't dance, but you make quilts or clothes or whatever. One of the things that I am becoming increasingly aware of is that young people in our community, because they have grown up in a technological age, don't always have a lot of what I call hand skills, practical skills,
Yes.
like cooking or sewing or gardening, or and so you always want to have practical skills or building something, you know,
Patching a hole in the wall.
patching a hole in the wall, basic plumbing. I
Hmm.
learned when I was young how to change my own oil.
That's right.
I have no money, but you know how to change your oil, this kind of thing. And so there is an opportunity for people to invite young people in through your local organizations, through your church, through your um, sorority or fraternity or whatever, and say, we're going to have a skills day this week. We're going to
Mm.
teach how to change your oil, or and get your young people there, because we need to arm our young people with not just technological skills, but practical skills.
Practical skills. That's right.
And about the technology, a lot of my students have grown up in a technological age, but they really don't understand technology or how it works. And so you're assuming, because they know some things about technology, that they really understand technology.
Mm.
you know, Teach them teach them how to use that. Teach them what they can really do. Teach them, how they can turn their interest in games or whatever into a practical profession.
That's right.
And there are lots of opportunities for that. So whatever it is, somebody else needs to know it.
Mm.
Start with that. Teach that.
Wow. Dr. Trimble, we're coming to a close, and I just want to before we officially close, I wanted just to uplift how, you know we've talked about so many things that are so applicable to like where we are right now as a people, as a nation, as a
Yeah.
world. And it's, you know, even in these seemingly dark periods, what you have illuminated for us today is that, like, you know, for you in creativity, but also for the rest of us, for all of us,
Mhm.
there's something surprisingly bright and joyful that could emerge out
Yes.
of our service, out
Yes.
of aligning with our purpose,
Yes.
out of just doing the things, if we lean into them. And
Absolutely.
so I would love to invite you to close us out with the language of joy.
Sure. So this was a poem I wrote based on a story my mother told me. I was writing all these poems about kind of the contemporary moment, and I got up one morning and I could not write another poem about a dead Black person. I just could not. It was too much in my spirit. And so my mother, who was a civil rights activist, was the only woman on the Montgomery Improvement Association board under Dr. Martin Luther King. Um, Told me the story about something that happened to her when she was a young woman, and I turned it into a poem. And it's called The Language of Joy. Black woman joy is like this. Mama said one day long before I was born, she was walking down the street, foxes around her neck, their little heads smiling up at her and out at the world. And she was wearing this suit she had saved up a month's paycheck for after it called to her so seductively from the window of this boutique. And that suit was wearing her, keeping all its promises in all the right places. Indigo, matching gloves, suede shoes, dippity doo dah in blue, with tassels, honey gold, and Lord, a hat with plume de peacock, a conductor's baton that bounced to hip rhythm. She looked so fine, she thought Louis Armstrong might pop up out of those movies she saw as a child, wipe his forehead, and sing bottle da bop a do de do de do do. And he did. Mama did not sing, but she was skillfully doing that day. And the foxes grinned, and she was the star of her own Hollywood musical. Here with Satchmo, who had called Ella over, and now they were all singing and dancing like a free people up Dexter Avenue. And don't think they didn't know they were walking in the footsteps of slaves and over auction sites and past where old wallets had held on to segregation like a life raft. But this was not that day. This day was for foxes and hip rhythm and musical perfection and folks on the street joining in the celebration of breath and holiness. And they did too. In color coordinated ensembles, they kicked and turned and grinned and shouted like church or a football game, whatever their religious preference. The air vibrated with music, arms, legs, and years of unrequited sunshine. Somebody did a flip up Dexter Avenue. It must have been a Nicholas brother in a featured performance. And Mama was Miss Lena Horn, Dorothy Dandridge, high stepping up the real estate, ready for her close up. That's when Mama felt this little tickle. She thought it might be pent up joy until a mouse squirmed out from underneath that fine collar over that fabulous fur, jumped off her shoulder, and ran down the street. Left my mama standing there on Dexter Avenue in her blue suit and dead foxes. And what did mama do? Everybody looking at her, robbed by embarrassment. She said, it be like that sometimes. Then she and Satchmo, Ella, and the whole crew jammed their way home.
Oh, that is a fabulous piece,
Thank you.
Dr. Trimble. I just want to thank you,
You're so
and
welcome.
I just want to thank you for your brilliance, your mentorship, your leadership, your poetry, for your advocacy, but also just for the way you help us remember, you know, and reclaim the
Yeah.
power of language, of joy in our voice and our purposes. And before, I would love to know if there's anything you have coming up exciting that you would like to share before we close out.
So on December the 8th, the governor is going to commission me as the next poet laureate of the state of Alabama. I'm very excited about that. December the 8th. And on December the 10th, I want to invite everyone to New South Books. There is going to be the re-release. University of Georgia Press is going to re-release American Happiness in paperback. And there's going to be, I'm going to do a reading from American Happiness, but also some of the new poems from Joy in a Time of Elegy. And it's going to be 5:30, December the 10th at New South Books.
That's awesome. And thank you for, honoring American Education Week with us, for showing us what it means to truly excel beyond boundaries as you continue to do so. We hope to talk to you again. And thank you. We'll go ahead and close out. Thank you so much, Dr. Dr. Trimble is a distinguished scholar, poet, and educator whose work embodies the mission of this moment, honoring educators who excel beyond boundaries. She has chosen to live, teach, write, and build in this place where she calls home. And in doing so, she roots excellence in community, legacy, and transformation. Since 2011, she has served as the chair of the Department of Languages and Literature at Alabama State University here in Montgomery, Alabama, guiding curriculum development, faculty recruitment, mentoring, and student success. In addition to her community and professional contributions, which are considerable, Dr. Trimble is very well known for her creative voice, which is rooted in place and memory, into broader questions of culture, language, and justice. As the department chair at an HBCU, of course, she's developing scholars, writers, and future educators. But most importantly, she's inspiring the thinkers and the doers of tomorrow. As a poet, she engages deeply with the intersection of Black life, Southern history, gender, grief, and joy, and turns those engagements into art that educates, provokes, and uplifts.